Great. Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for joining us. My name is Maria Belén Power, and I'm the Undersecretary of Environmental Justice and Equity here at the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs. Welcome to our 23rd meeting of the EJ Council, the Environmental Justice Council. I will turn it over to ERG before we get started to just do a quick run through of logistics and language interpretation.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Kessel, and I'm with ERG, a contractor supporting these meetings. Before we get started, I have some meeting logistics to go over. So this presentation is available with interpretation into Spanish, Portuguese, Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean Creole, Vietnamese, Mandarin Chinese, and American Sign Language. We're now going to go through that list with our interpreters. So the language announcements will now begin. In English, to participate in English, click the interpretation icon and select English. In Portuguese, please.
Para entrar no canal em português, clique no ícone Interpretação e selecione Português. Obrigado. Thank you.
Thank you. For Spanish, please.
Si alguien desea interpretación en español, haga clic en Interpretación y seleccione Español. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you. For Cape Verdean Creole, please.
Para participar na crioulo, clica na ícone Interpretation e seleciona Cape Verdean Creole.
Thank you. For Haitian Creole, please.
Pour entrer dans channel créole haïtien, cliquez sur l'icône interprétation et puis choisir Haitian Creole. Thank you.
Thank you. For Mandarin Chinese, please.
如果要以普通话参加会议，请单击口语图标并选择 Chinese。
Thank you. For Vietnamese, please.
Để vào kênh bằng tiếng Việt, hãy nhấp vào biểu tượng Interpretation và chọn Vietnamese.
Thank you. And to see this meeting translated into American Sign Language, please click on the interpretation icon and select American Sign Language. All right, our language interpretation is complete. I'm now going to turn on interpretation on Zoom. All right, everyone should have seen a little globe icon pop up on their Zoom control panel. If you did not see it, you might have to click the More button, which is indicated by 3 dots to the right hand of your panel, and if the interpretation will pop up on the menu there. Oh, and English speakers are encouraged to select English as well so they can hear any translated comments. Closed captioning is auto-generated and was available by clicking on the CC icon in your Zoom control panel. And once again, if you don't see it immediately, please click on the More, and it should pop up there. If you would like to use telephone audio for this meeting, you can select the small arrow next to the audio settings, select Switch to Phone Audio, and follow the instructions provided. Attendees can send an email to meetings@erg.com with any technical questions related to meeting logistics. If you would like a translated version of the presentation slides, you can go to the Environmental Justice Council website at the link in the chat. And you will also find a complete set of slides that we're using in English there as well. This meeting is being recorded and will later be made available for viewing through a link that will be posted on the Environmental Justice website at that same link that's being posted. And also for clarification, these slides are available in English and they are currently being the presenter slides, you'll see them in a second, are currently being interpreted into different languages, and they will be posted when they are ready. Attendees can submit questions in the Q&A box whenever they would like during this presentation. If you would like to make a verbal comment, we have time allotted during the public comment sessions. Please wait for this time before making comments. During the public comment session, please raise your hand using the raise hand icon in your Zoom control panel, and I will unmute you. If you are commenting in another language, please speak into your language channel and your interpreter will translate the comments into English. Or you may type a comment into the Q&A box and I will read it aloud. Please keep comments under 2 minutes to ensure everyone has the chance to speak. For everyone who will be speaking tonight, please speak slowly to accommodate the interpreters. Please use simple language and minimize the use of acronyms. I would also like to remind the council members to only use the chat function for meeting logistics and for no other communication in accordance with open meeting law. We are also asking all council members to leave their cameras on for the whole meeting. All right, that is it for Zoom logistics. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Maria Belen for the agenda and roll call.
Thank you, Kessel. If we can get the slide with the agenda, that would be helpful. I'll go through the agenda. I don't think I can see it. Am I the only one?
Can you not see the slides at all? Okay.
I could see it, but
There is a tab on the top left of the Zoom screen, and you'll have to go to the one that says Kessel John's, or it says my screen to me, but Kessel John's screen.
Right.
Yes, that one.
Yep.
Do you see
I got it.
Wonderful.
Yep. Thank you. So today we will be, as always, providing an opportunity at the beginning of the meeting as well as after the presentation for question and comments from the public. And we do that so that folks who want to participate don't have to stay for the whole meeting in order to provide questions or comments. We will then go through our presenter, Undersecretary Judge, who will talk about the energy affordability agenda of our Secretariat and the administration. Then we will do question and comments from the public, and depending on time, we will respond to comments. And then we will close with next steps. Now I'll pass it to ERG Kessel again for our roll call.
Thank you. All right. Kalila Barnett. Oh, also for our council members, please verbally note that you are here. All right. Madeline Fraser Cook. Melissa Harding Ferretti.
present.
Cheryl Holly. Lydia Lowe.
Present.
Marcos Luna. Peter Mathe.
Present.
Maria Belen Power.
Present.
Sophia Owen. Jen Salinetti. Patricia Spence.
Here.
Ari Zorn.
Here.
And Miles Gresham. All right, it looks like we only have 7 members attending.
Hi, this is Caroline Hahn. You didn't call my name, but I am here.
Oh, I didn't? I'm so sorry. In that case, we have 8 members.
Are we positive about having 8?
Let me double check.
Kessel, I just counted 7.
Okay. We have Melissa.
We can
Lydia.
keep. Yeah, why don't we keep going before doing any formal approval of the minutes?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe folks at ERG can let me know if, when, and if we have other members join?
Yes, let's do that. All right.
Okay. So we'll go to public comment and questions. Kessel ran through a bit of the logistics for this, but not sure, Kessel, if you want to do it again, or if we should just take the questions and comments.
I can do it again. Let's do it again. All right. For our attendees, if you are speaking in another language or just would like to make a verbal comment, you can raise your hand and I will give you the ability to unmute yourself. If you're speaking in a different language, please speak into your language room and the interpreters will translate what you say into the English room. You can submit written questions through the Q&A box and I will read them aloud. And I would once again like to take this time to remind everyone who's speaking to speak slowly and clearly for our interpreters and to keep your comments to 2 minutes or less. All right, I see we have one person with their hand raised, Mary Ann Babinski. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm Mary Ann Babinski. I'm from Westfield, Massachusetts. I am a former city councilor, and I'm also working with some residents in this community and the area of town where I was a ward, and used to in an area of residents who used to be EJ population, designated an EJ population. I don't know if any of you remember, but in September of 2023, I did bring a concern about EJ communities who had lost their EJ designation after COVID and when the new census came out. And it was mentioned to me at the time of that meeting in 2023 that there was no process yet and that a process was needed to continue to deal with those cases if residents petitioned the state, as is stipulated in the EJ law, the roadmap law. But here it is 2 years later, and I'm told that there's still no process available in order to take it to the next step. Members of the EJ population in my community did petition the state in February of this year, and now we know it's December, another year's closing. So they're having a problem and getting frustrated because we can't move forward because there isn't a process yet that has been established. So I'm going to make it short here today. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to respectfully ask that the EJ Council motion today to add an item to their next meeting agenda that will deal with EJ designation process, finally get that step completed or work towards getting that step completed for those communities that put in a petition to the state to gain EJ status for their area. Now, I would also like to stipulate that I don't know if you can make special consideration for EJ communities who had the EJ status, which this community in Westfield had, and then they lost it. I wish there was a way to red flag when that happens. Somebody is paying attention to the situation and knows when something like that has changed. I know there are communities that never had it, also because of the law can apply through a petition if they meet one of the four statuses that require them to be named as an EJ population. But I think those who had it and lost it maybe could have special consideration. So in particular, then I'm saying a way to address those communities who had it and lost it, and then of course you follow through with whatever your process says to deal with any other communities. And then having a red flag also for those communities who all of a sudden lost it, and we need to investigate why that did happen. So if that can happen, and I know it's not lost on me that your next meetings, I already looked at the schedule, it doesn't happen until February, and that will be a year since they first petitioned the state. So if that can be part of your agenda and a discussion can begin so we can finally do this. And probably one other, whether it's related to this or not, I just learned myself that there is difference between an EJ screen and a mass enviro screen. And so if it could be clarified somehow, in some way, whether through this council or however that gets done, so that the people that have been paying attention to what's been going on in the state now with all your public hearings that you've been having on CIA and siting of development, that we know the distinction, a clear explanation of what the distinction is between EJ screen and mass enviro screen. And I don't know if they overlap or what the difference is going to be, because it's, now that I just learned that, it's kind of confusing as how you will handle those kinds of situations when EJ populations need to be contacted to have involvement, to have outreach, to be involved in the decision-making process for any siting of whether it's renewable energy or otherwise. So I thank you very much for the time to pose that question, and I hope that that motion can be made if you have enough of a quorum tonight, if it can be made to add to the next agenda. Thank you very much. And I
Thank
wish
you
you
so
all
much.
happy holidays for this month.
Thank you, Marianne. I really appreciate it. I think we should be able to add that to the agenda for a meeting in February, and perhaps we can come to the council with some options or some ideas. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Valian Kwong. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself.
你好，你听到我说吗？翻译，你听到，因为我说国语的。OK， 那我直接 call 了啊我是住在波士顿的居民我在唐人街工作，因为我在过去
I'm living in Boston. I'm a resident there, and over the past few years, due to the language barriers in Chinatown and any other residents using Chinese, there are a lot of scammers, and we have seen a lot of scammers in the past. So I'm wondering in the future, EG or any other one, in this kind of situation, for people speaking a second language that's not English, are there any preventative measures you can help us? It's because the electricity bill seems to hike up when most people are using electricity during the year, especially we're living in the area in Boston that's quite pricey. And a lot of people in our district are low income, are on low income. I think they're doing physical labor or restaurant, and they have really low incomes. And they may not even meet the low income to receive any sort of welfare and benefits. If my salary is slightly higher than the low income wage, then I'm not able to receive the welfare, and my electricity bills or gas bills is really high. So if I need to switch or change any of my electricity or electrical appliances in my house, it's very expensive for me. And also the labor fee that came with it. And I cannot receive any welfare or benefit. So could the government consider this for me, especially for us in the working class, and protect us? And also the government is encouraging us to use the new income or the newcomers welfare, but I know that one's also really pricey. So we're trying to protect our environment, but also we would like to be considered as well for our concerns.
Great.
Can I add 最后一点就是希望
And
将来
one last thing.
特别是用不同第二种语言
In the
的
future, I hope
社区
that
可以
for
多一点
districts
帮助，
speaking
让大
a
家
second
知道
language, I
有
hope
需
to
要可
receive
以
more
拿到
support
这些
and help,
补
and
助
also
或者
different
是他们
channels for
语言
us
的
to
时候
receive
有时候
welfare and
会
benefits
困难
because the language
谢谢
barrier is a difficulty for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your comment. I hope people were able to understand through the interpretation channel. And maybe I'll ask my colleague, Undersecretary Judge, when he joins to speak just a little bit about third-party suppliers. The person who commented expressed concerns about scammers and energy prices hiking and folks having a hard time, especially when they don't speak English, but also accessing other support and services. So thank you so much. I really appreciate the comment.
I think also the comment, as I understood it, she wasn't talking so much about welfare, but about government benefits, like government support,
Got
you know,
it.
for low income people to be able to access. Yeah.
Got it. That's a good, thank you for clarifying, Lydia.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to help clarify some points on that too, if you want.
Sure.
So I'll just start by saying that we do have programs for, well, there's a number of programs. So I'll start with low-income customer discount rates. So if you meet certain income thresholds or are already participating in a whole host and variety of different programs that are available to certain income people who have certain income levels, then you may qualify for a discount rate on your electricity and gas if you're a customer of an investor-owned utility. So these are the utilities that are regulated by the Department of Public Utilities, mostly Eversource, National Grid, Unitil, Liberty Gas, and Berkshire Gas. So if you aren't enrolled and you think you may be eligible, I would urge you to contact your utility provider or providers. Because those discounts can be pretty significant depending on where you live. There's also programs through Mass Save, the state's energy efficiency program, that provide discounts to income eligible low income customers and moderate income customers. For low income customers, the measures that are eligible to be funded are paid for 100% through that program. And there's been a lot of improvements in the current 3-year plan that we're operating under right now to really address equity issues that have been challenges in the past. And I think there's been a lot more robust participation among low-income customers in the current plan. So there's been a lot of effort put into that. So again, another area where customers can try to take control of their energy usage. The last thing I'll note is the Department of Public Utilities has been working on an energy affordability docket, part of which would potentially establish a moderate income discount rate, so for electric customers. So in addition to that low income discount rate, a moderate income rate.
Can I just ask for folks that don't know what is a docket?
Yes. So it's an investigation, a proceeding that the Department of Public Utilities has opened into the topic, trying to figure out what are the appropriate thresholds to qualify, what is the appropriate percentage discount that should be applied, how would the utilities enroll customers, so trying to figure out how they actually implement that. And so they put it into a proceeding that we commonly refer to as a docket. So
then one last thing is on, it sounded to me from the comment that there was a concern around
Competitive supply.
scammers or what the
Yeah.
what the commenter called scammers or
A major concern of ours as well, I would say. And I think the governor's legislation tries to address this in a number of ways. So I'll get into that in a few minutes when we talk about governor's energy legislation, affordability legislation. But it's also something that the House of Representatives in the bill that they did advance out of committee recently, it has not been voted on yet. They included a lot of those provisions. So in order to really address some of the kind of real problems with that market and those competitive retail suppliers, we need to have some legislative reforms. But the DPU, the Department of Public Utilities, does everything in its power to try to prevent and go after any suppliers that have engaged in deceptive marketing tactics or misleading marketing tactics. And has, for one supplier, an active investigation right now where they've alleged a whole series of consumer protection violations and is threatening that supplier with a revocation of their license and a $5 million fine and asking them to pay money back to customers that were harmed. So there are some actions that are underway, but we do really think we need additional legislative authority to really curb some of the big problems that we see in that space.
Great. Thank you. And Kessel, I think we have quorum if we want to go back and vote on the minutes.
Yes, let me go do that. All right. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to do roll call again. So, Kalila Barnett, Madeline Fraser Cook, Melissa Harding Ferretti,
Present.
Cheryl Holly,
Here.
Caroline Hahn,
Here.
Lydia Lowe,
Here.
Marcos Luna, Peter Mathe,
Here.
Maria Belen Power, Sophia Owen, Jen Salinetti, Patricia Spence,
Here.
Ari Zorn,
Here.
Miles Gresham. All right, we have 8 members, and so we have quorum.
Great, thank you. So from the members, can I get a motion to approve the minutes from October 30th? That was the meeting number 22.
Motion.
Caroline, can I get a second?
I second.
I can second. Yep.
Peter Mate.
Thank you. And is there any discussion on the minutes? No? Right,
I have a quick question.
Yes, go ahead.
So I was not here for that last meeting. I'm assuming that I wouldn't be allowed to comment on that.
Yeah, you would abstain.
Yes.
So when we right now we'll go through the roll call, and when your name comes up, you would abstain.
Okay.
All right, Kessel, could you do the roll call?
Mm-hmm. All right, Kalila Barnett, and this is to approve the minutes. Kalila Barnett, Madeline Fraser Cook, Melissa Harding Ferretti,
Yes. Present.
Sorry, just for clarification, this is to approve the minutes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl Holly,
Yes.
Caroline Hahn,
Yes.
Lydia Lowe,
Abstain.
Marcos Luna, Peter Mathe,
Abstain.
Maria Belen Power,
Approve.
Sophia Owen, Jen Salinetti, Patricia Spence,
Abstain.
Ari Zorn,
Abstain.
Miles Gresham. All right, we had 4 say approve, 0 say disapprove, and 4 abstained. I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think it's approved.
Great. All right. The motion carries. The minutes are approved.
Thank you.
Great.
Kessel, I think we should move into the presentation and allow for comments and questions. For public comment and questions after the presentation, and Undersecretary Judge can share whether he prefers to take questions from the council members during the presentation or wait until he finishes. But I guess now I'll introduce again Undersecretary Mike Judge, who is going to talk to us about the energy affordability agenda, and very relevant to the comment that was just shared by the resident of Boston, but very relevant to all ratepayers in Massachusetts. So thank you, Undersecretary Judge, and I'll pass it to you.
Great, thank you. So I'm happy to take questions from members as I'm going through. So if there's something that's, if you have an itch and you want to ask something during my presentation, please feel free to do so. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the governor's energy affordability legislation that was filed in May, and also about some of the cost drivers that we've seen, like what has been driving up electricity costs and gas costs, and what have we been trying to do to bring them down. So in developing the legislation, I think we who were involved in drafting it really took a hard look at existing spending on energy and programs and existing policies to really understand what is driving costs so that we can lower customer bills, stabilize prices, and reduce volatility, avoid spending on unnecessary infrastructure programs and energy costs, and really bring more energy online to bring down the cost and stabilize and accomplish all these objectives. And so when we look back at what is driving costs, we really, the key findings that we found were that transmission and distribution infrastructure investments are the biggest cost drivers. And they are expected to continue growing. We have an aging grid, one of the oldest grids in the country. A lot of that infrastructure needs to be replaced. There's a lot of infrastructure that's being modernized and updated. The cost of building that has gone up. Inflation is driving up the cost of equipment and steel, and the cost of labor has gone up. So it's not cheap to run a utility company these days. But those infrastructure investments have been the biggest driver of cost over the last 10 years or so. Another driver is energy supply costs. That is primarily driven by natural gas prices. We are very dependent on natural gas for electric and heating. About 50% or more of both of our electric and heating needs are met through natural gas. So the price of natural gas really sets the price for energy supply in the region. And I think while it hasn't grown in absolute terms as much as some of these infrastructure costs over the last 10 years, it is the most volatile component of energy bills. And then I think one thing just to note, there's been a lot of focus on energy efficiency programs and their impact on costs. I think there's been a lot of finger pointing at energy efficiency programs. That it is true that is a line item on customer bills. But what we have seen is that has grown at a slower pace than all other parts of the bill. We do think that it can be provided more efficiently and paid for differently, but those programs are driving a lot of benefits. We consume more than 10% less electricity today than when we first created the framework that we have about 17 years ago. So in that time, our population has grown, our economy has grown, our dependence on electricity has grown, but we are consuming less because of those programs, and that is avoiding the need for additional infrastructure and additional power plants. So in drafting this legislation, we really tried to take a holistic approach to try to tackle this issue from a lot of different angles. There's not any one thing that is going to dramatically lower costs. You need to take a lot of different actions to chip away at those high energy bills. One second here, trying to advance. Okay, so just looking at, we'll go back, sorry. Looking at historic electric rates. Something to note is that in the last 10 years, all bill components have increased by more than 100%. Again, the largest cost driver, more than 50% of that total rate increase, is coming from increased transmission and distribution costs. But everything has grown. And again, energy efficiency is growing at a slower rate than some of these other components, with benefits exceeding those costs. But you can see here the top line on this chart. Those are supply costs, and they vary seasonally. You can see most winters the price goes up, but they can be very spiky and subject to global market pressures. So that huge spike you see in the winter of 2022-2023, that is directly following the invasion of Ukraine. And what happened was there was a dramatic upheaval in the gas markets, global gas markets that winter, and gas prices went through the roof, and that's why we saw a massive spike. So I think, in our view, trying to become less dependent on a single fuel source is going to be beneficial for us in keeping supply costs under control. Another thing to note, though, is that we are building a lot of clean energy. So we need to keep this going, but I wanted to highlight, since 2012, we've added 6,700 megawatts of new clean energy generating capacity through long-term contracts, our solar programs, and other compensation programs. So the SREC programs and net metering and the SMART program have added getting close to 4,000 megawatts, so over 3,800 megawatts of distributed solar. That's all based in Massachusetts. The New England Clean Energy Connect transmission line is going to be bringing 1,200 megawatts of imported Canadian hydro to the region, likely this month, starting this month. Vineyard Wind is the largest offshore wind project in the region, is operating and is nearly finished construction. And then we've entered into long-term contracts with onshore wind and utility scale solar. So we are adding a lot of supply, but we need to keep the pace up and need to add more. Since 2012, I mentioned earlier, our energy efficiency programs have lowered our energy consumption as a state. We're continuing to pursue additional procurement opportunities. The SMART program has been reauthorized, and we're trying to get more solar built through that program. And it's now the case that over 50% of our annual consumption is met by clean energy sources, actually maybe close to 75% now with the addition of the New England Clean Energy Connect and Vineyard Wind projects. So a pretty significant amount of clean energy being added to the grid. That said, the federal government is slowing our progress on this. More than 2,000 megawatts of new clean energy generation sources that could have been deployed by the end of this decade or thereabouts have been delayed or canceled by the Trump administration. So that is we're facing some headwinds on the federal front. On the gas side of the equation, the story is somewhat the same. So when we looked at the last 10 years, again, I should have mentioned, these are national grid residential rates. We're using national grid just as a representative utility. If you looked at other utilities, you'd see very similar trend lines. But what we see here is about 56% of the growth in gas rates is due to gas system infrastructure investments, with the gas system enhancement program being the fastest growing component of that over the last 10 years. And 35% of the growth has also come from higher supply costs. And then 9% of that growth is coming from energy efficiency program costs. So everything's growing, but really infrastructure and gas supply, those are sort of the biggest drivers on the gas side. There aren't as many levers that we can pull to reduce costs on the gas side. So what have we done? We've tried to get more energy online faster. We're engaging in comprehensive permitting and siting reform to get projects online and built quicker and cheaper. We've we've implemented heat pump rates to reduce costs for customers that have heat pumps. Customers that enroll in these rates could save as much as $500 or more over the course of the winter heating season this year. And we had a very successful rollout. Got to compliment the utilities on doing that and getting nearly every heat pump customer that we know of enrolled in the span of just a couple weeks after putting those rates into effect. The governor has asked the DPU to comprehensively review all rates and charges on the books to see if there's any cost savings that can be achieved. We've been engaging in long-term rate design efforts to kind of think about better ways to regulate utilities and bill customers. As I mentioned, we've added a lot of supply to the grid, and we've made some reforms to the way that we invest in gas distribution, the gas distribution system. So we're really trying to do what we can within our existing authority. But what the Energy Affordability Infrastructure and Innovation Act the governor filed does is it really it does a lot of different things, but it would enable comprehensive distribution system planning, expanded and flexible energy procurement, allow things to interconnect to the grid faster, create innovative financing options, improve mass save and make it more efficient, eliminate certain program costs altogether. So programs that aren't serving customers well anymore or not achieving public policy objectives, just get them off the books. And then also allowing for customers to invest in more efficient heating and cooling options. I'll start going through a few different provisions and just talk about what they do and how they save money. So starting with bringing more clean energy into Massachusetts. So I mentioned we've been successful on this front to some degree, but we don't have a lot of projects in the pipeline right now. And we know that we're going to need a lot more clean energy to achieve our objectives and to diversify our resource mix so that we're not so dependent on natural gas and other fossil fuels. So one thing we're recommending doing is removing the utility as the primary contracting agent for clean energy and creating a division of clean energy procurement at the Department of Energy Resources. So DOER is already very involved in these procurement processes, and they make the selection for projects today. But the utilities are involved, and that requires them to actually enter into the contracts. They earn remuneration on those contracts, which adds hundreds of millions, actually billions of dollars, if you look at all the contracts together, to the cost of these contracts. We're the only state in the country that does that. We think that we should move to a model where the state is entering into these contracts directly on behalf of customers. Other states do this. New York does this. Connecticut does this. And this would create a lot more flexibility for the state in procuring different types of clean energy resources, setting the schedule for those procurements, and determining how much we need. And then another thing that we would do, this is another provision of the bill, but related to this topic, is repealing a law that requires any new proposed nuclear facility to receive approval through a statewide ballot initiative. So there's a law on the books that requires statewide ballot initiative for any new nuclear facility. Nuclear operators and developers have told us they would never, ever consider building in Massachusetts with this law on the books. And we're not talking about building necessarily large conventional nuclear facilities like the ones that were built 30, 40, 50 years ago. But the nuclear technology has dramatically advanced in recent decades. And there are now small modular reactors, microreactors that have a much smaller footprint. They produce much smaller amounts of radioactive waste that need to be managed. And they are, significantly safer to operate. But they provide baseload generation capacity, and they could help us diversify our energy resources in a way that adds zero emissions to the grid. So really, the purpose here is get more clean energy online, clear barriers, create more flexibility, and really try to remove some of these administrative fees that ratepayers are paying for the procurements that we conduct today. In the category of getting costs off bills, there's a few different things I would mention. So first is just reforming net metering credit values for facilities going forward. So this is not going to go change net metering compensation for facilities that have been built. But notably, Massachusetts has by far the highest net metering compensation for certain types of facilities in the country. And those costs are passed on to ratepayers. The cost of recovering the credits that are issued to these customers do get passed on. So we think we can get solar built at a much lower price point and avoid these very high net metering costs going forward. We also think that making some small reforms to the SMART program to address market dynamics would help. So this is kind of a smaller tweak. Another bigger one is eliminating the alternative portfolio standard. This standard exists to support natural gas-fired combined heat and power facilities and fuel cells. It also does provide support to clean heating and cooling technologies. So we're not proposing to eliminate the standard right away, but there are other incentives that are bigger drivers for clean heating and cooling that exist, and we just think that this program has largely outlived its usefulness. So the idea would be we would set a sunset date, create a transition process to make sure that projects that were depending on this program are made whole, but then eliminate the program off of customer bills within a couple years from now, so that this cost is just no longer a line item that customers pay for on their bills. And then lastly, we would
Excuse me. I'm so sorry. Could you slow down slightly?
Yep.
Thank you so much.
And then lastly, we would require the DPU to review all charges on customer bills and reform those if possible, with a goal towards reducing the number of charges on bills, potentially capping month-to-month increases, and just really reducing month-to-month bill volatility. Through these initiatives, we've projected that this could save up to $1.9 billion over 10 years. Another really big one is reining in infrastructure spending. So asking so a couple things in this. One is creating more accountability at the utilities, allowing the Department of Public Utilities to require utilities to incorporate innovative load management strategies. So let's use the grid that we have more efficiently and optimize the use of that grid. We build the electric grid to meet the maximum peak demand over the course of a year. And very rarely is a lot of that infrastructure being used to its full extent. But you can better manage when customers are using electricity, and through that, avoid the need for unnecessary infrastructure investment, and you don't have to overbuild the grid to meet that 1 hour of peak demand. And that can save a tremendous amount of money, because these are investments that are recovered over decades. And so if you can avoid them, that's costs that are being avoided for many years into the future. Another thing is there's a lot of different planning processes right now. There's a planning process for electric vehicles. There's a planning process for solar. There's a planning process for new load. There's a planning process for just maintaining the utility infrastructure that we have and upgrading the grid for reliability. We think that these could be consolidated. There's a lot of overlapping requirements. We would like to consolidate planning into a more comprehensive, holistic process and have one proceeding at the Department of Public Utilities that integrates all of these things and tries to avoid inefficient spending in planning processes. And this is one of the biggest cost savings from the governor's legislation that we've modeled. We're also just trying to connect things to the grid faster. So there's this concept of flexible interconnection. So the utilities, when they study a customer that wants to connect to the grid, whether it's a new building, a new housing development, or a new solar facility or a battery storage facility, they often assume and examine and study the facility as if it's going to have the maximum possible impact. So they'll assume that the battery is charging the battery during the peak period, and try to model the impacts on the grid for that scenario. So what we're saying is, well, why don't we take a step back and think about ways that we can interconnect these facilities and have them structure the way that they operate to sort of fit to the grid so that they can connect faster, they can connect cheaper, and that we don't have to build additional infrastructure to bring them online. So this is going to help new customers that are adding electric load to the grid, but also new customers that are adding supply or batteries to manage the grid better. This is another one that's a pretty big change in how things work today. So natural gas utilities for a few years now have been exploring the development of networked geothermal systems. And so these are, you drill down into the ground, you use the natural temperature of the earth to heat and cool buildings. It's the most efficient way that we can heat and cool, but it has very expensive upfront costs. And customers can do this individually, but what they can't do is connect into a network, because then you start running into, now they're sort of operating like a utility and there's limitations on what they can do. So what we're proposing to do is allow gas utilities to build, own, and operate geothermal systems, not own every aspect of the system, but sort of the wells in the ground and the pipes that connect everything for individual customers, and have regulatory oversight, transparent rates for those customers. But this is really focused on getting large energy users, campuses, colleges, hospitals, to be able to invest in this infrastructure without having to put a lot of capital up front. That's one of the biggest barriers that they face, is paying for this on their own. If the utility can come in and put it on its balance sheet and then work with that customer, charge that customer for it, no other customer needs to pay for that system. So the large energy user is paying for it on their own. But the way that everyone else benefits is that customer has reduced gas demand, likely because they probably switched away from gas. And so they put downward pressure on gas prices and downward pressure on expanding the gas system. But they've also invested in the most efficient form of electric heating. So they're reducing strain on the electric grid. So everyone else benefits from these large customers switching, but allowing the utility to come in and be the party that can help finance, own, operate that is a solution that's sort of a win-win-win for everyone. But it also enables expansion of that system to serve other customers, because if one campus does it and then their next door neighbor wants to do it, it's very easy, or it's easier for the utility to connect those two customers into a network system. So really just trying to provide some innovative thinking in this space to really accelerate the deployment of efficient electric heating and cooling through geothermal. We've also proposed creating some provisions that would allow critical facility and government microgrids to cross public rights of way. So there's some regulatory hurdles that exist today that prevent a lot of customers from pursuing a microgrid. You can do it for yourself, but if you wanted to connect, say, the town hall and the police station and the fire department, and they were across the street, you would not be allowed to do that today. So this just sort of explores this, tries to demonstrate how this might work, and is sort of a way to sort of get a real conversation going about how microgrids can operate and the benefits that they can provide. And it comes at no cost to other customers. Moving into sort of some other categories here, looking at utility accountability, we've proposed prohibiting the use of ratepayer funds for certain utility activities, such as lobbying, promotion, perks, et cetera. A lot of this is generally prohibited today, but it's sort of codifying it, making sure that these things are very clearly prevented from being recovered in electric and gas rates. We've also proposed providing for periodic management and operation audits of investor-owned utility companies to really ensure that their management practices and the way that they're going about their business is being scrutinized by the Department of Public Utilities, and that they can do some comparison across companies too. So the purpose of this is just really ensuring that inappropriate costs are not being passed on to customers, and that utilities are being held accountable. We talked about this a little bit earlier in response to the comment, that one of the comments that was made before. But competitive supply is a really big area of concern and has been a topic of discussion for the last 3 or 4 legislative sessions, and no action has happened on it. So we tried to come in and create sort of maybe a middle ground between the House and the Senate's perspectives on this, by proposing a series of comprehensive reforms that would not eliminate the residential competitive supply market, but would create new licensing and bonding requirements for suppliers, require energy marketers to be licensed, and then expand and clarify the DPU's enforcement authority in this space. So really creating some more oversight at the DPU. And then increase those maximum civil penalties and allow for direct restitution for customers. So today, if the DPU finds that a supplier has violated some consumer protection standard, they're not allowed, they can impose a civil penalty that goes and gets deposited into the state's general fund, but they're not allowed to direct restitution to the customers that are harmed. So this corrects that and would allow them to require direct restitution to customers. And then I think the most important thing here, it proposes a number of product limitations. So preventing automatic renewals without a customer's written consent, no variable rate contracts, so you can't switch a customer from a fixed price to a month-to-month variable rate. We've seen a lot of abuses in this where suppliers will lure someone in with the promise of low introductory rates, and then they will automatically renew them to a variable rate contract and consistently increase their rates every month. We prevent early termination fees and no cancellation fees, put limits on these voluntary clean energy products that are being offered so that there's no greenwashing where people sell customers a very low value clean energy product that they mark up the price on significantly. We've seen situations where suppliers have charged customers 50 times the value of the product, but there's not transparency into that, so the customer doesn't know. So really, the goal here is reduce ratepayer exposure to these predatory practices, lower supply costs, improve DPU oversight and enforcement authority, and really eliminate some of the worst practices in the market today while preserving customer choice. We project this could save tens of millions of dollars for the subset of customers that are on competitive supply annually. So this is a pretty significant savings for that group of customers. We've also looked at innovative financing options. So allowing on-bill financing for energy efficiency and electrification measures, that puts downward pressure on incentive programs to have to pay for that with other ratepayer dollars. Allowing nonprofits to invest in distribution and geothermal infrastructure and share those benefits with communities. So that allows the utilities to invest more and faster, but at a lower cost, because the money from these nonprofits would earn gets reinvested in the form of a community benefits agreement or reductions for low-income customer bills. And then also another key provision that we've proposed is authorizing lower-cost utility debt financing. So how do you pay for the Mass Save program? Today, we pay for it and we expense it. It is $1.5 billion every year. So every measure that gets deployed in a year gets paid for in that year. This would allow, if it makes good financial sense for customers, for longer term financing of those assets. When you invest in energy efficiency, those measures provide benefits for 10, 15, 20 years. So we're saying, let's align the cost recovery of that with the length of time that the measure is providing benefits. And we've modeled that could create a tremendous reduction in energy bills month to month, because it's sort of equivalent to like taking out a mortgage or taking out a loan on your car. Is you can pay for it up front, but it's not as affordable to do so. So that's sort of the analogy there. There's no title on this one, or it came off, but I know what it's talking about. But there's an issue in multifamily housing where if the property owner wants to invest in a central heat pump, that they are deterred from doing so because when they do that, there's no way to meter the energy use of the individual tenants. So they may have to absorb costs that they previously were not responsible for paying. So what ends up happening is they continue using fossil fuel systems, or they install oversized heat pumps in each individual unit. And so it can lead to sort of suboptimal outcomes for tenants. So what we do here is this would authorize landlords to bill tenants for heating, cooling, if they install a centralized heat pump and they have the appropriate energy monitoring systems. There would be consumer protections to prevent any rent hikes following installation, and to ensure that these are truly pass-through costs, that they're not earning any profit. They're not allowed to earn a profit. There's definitely some consumer protection things that we're working out with folks to try to figure out how to implement this. But just to note, Massachusetts is one of just a handful of states that does not allow any form of electric submetering for any purpose. So this is done in other jurisdictions routinely. And we think if they can do it there, we can do it here. And this would promote some of the most efficient forms of heating to be installed in big multifamily buildings. On the Mass Save front, we have proposed a series of reforms to largely reduce administrative costs and make the program operate more efficiently. So some of the provisions that we've put in there are just codifying practices that have been in place now for several years. But a few of the key things would be to consolidate program administrators, eliminate some of the gas program administrators, and then direct program funds to be pooled statewide. So you're just allowing for, we've projected, I think, about a 10% reduction in administrative costs of the program, using statewide competitive procurements, single statewide contracts, develop a centralized data platform, create a one-stop resource for consumers. So really just try to make the program work more efficiently and increase accountability and deliver benefits to consumers better than it does today. This was just sort of a note. This is actually from a different presentation. I'll note this because I do think it's an important thing to kind of highlight. I think a lot of times we've heard people say, well, you know, heat pumps, like why would we invest in those? Heat pumps aren't energy efficiency. Building decarbonization isn't energy efficiency. And I think we've been trying to sort of dispel that myth because when you convert a customer from, and also people will say, well, converting to heat pumps, if the grid isn't clean, that's not creating a benefit. But when you convert someone from gas or fossil fuel to a heat pump, they're using a lot less units of energy to produce the same amount of useful thermal heat. And so what the graph on the left shows is shows the amount of gas you buy to heat a home, and then you can see the wasted heat and the useful heat, and that reflects the efficiency of the furnace or the boiler and line losses and other things to get that gas to the home. And then on the other side, you see the heat pump and how much how much gas you'd be using to create the electricity needed for that, and then you can see the savings there. And so what we've modeled is that if we were to convert every gas building in the state to heat pumps, it would result in and you ran all of those heat pumps using gas-fired electric power plants, you'd consume 40% less gas to get the same amount of heat. So this was sort of, as I said, coming from a different presentation to a different audience, and it got left in here. But I thought it was just maybe an interesting fact to kind of point out to folks. So I'll note there's some links here to the website where we have more information on all these different bill provisions, but I did just want to end on a note of where things are at right now. Sorry for the small font here, but the current status of this is that the House Telecommunications, Utility, and Energy Committee advanced its version of a bill out of committee on November 12th. That bill now sits at the House Ways and Means Committee, which has an opportunity to make revisions to that bill. Notably, the bill contains many provisions from the governor's bill. So it includes comprehensive planning, reforms to energy supply procurement, allowing DOER to conduct those clean energy procurements, a lot of the competitive supply reforms, requirement for flexible interconnection, allowing the utilities to own and operate geothermal. It repeals the statewide ballot referendum requirement for new nuclear, and it includes a number of the changes to the alternative portfolio standard that I mentioned, which is the program that we feel has sort of outlived its usefulness. It also contains several new or substantially modified provisions. It reforms residential solar permitting to automate and streamline permitting at the local level. It creates consumer protection standards for marketing residential solar to customers. It includes some climate and affordability standards and analysis requirements, so examining the costs of programs. That's, I think, one area where there's been a lot of press attention on, and changes Mass Save in a different way than the governor's legislation, so pretty significant differences in approach to how the TUE committee has proposed modifying Mass Save versus what the governor's bill does. It would permit utilities to competitively procure energy generation and transportation services. It has a temporary reduction to the state's renewable portfolio standard requirements. It requires 70% of the alternative compliance payments collected under the state's renewable portfolio standard to be given back to ratepayers in any given year. And it does codify some of the low income discount rate components that the governor's bill would have enabled, but it repeals the moderate income discount rate for electric customers that the legislature passed just last year. So there's still a lot of steps left in this process. The House is going to, we understand the House will be resuming discussion and debate when they return to formal sessions in January. In the meantime, they are working on potentially modifying this bill. The Senate is also working on its version of the bill. And I would say timing is unclear in both houses at this time, but they're both working hard on this. And there's a lot of movement and a lot of discussions that are ongoing. So we expect that things could happen quickly in the new year. It's just hard to say at this time. With that, I'll close, and I'm happy to take any questions that people might have.
Thank you, Undersecretary Judge. We could stop sharing screen for a little bit, Kessel. If folks have any questions for Undersecretary Judge. I know that was a lot of information.
Yeah, I know. Sorry. Sorry to throw so much at you. There's a lot in the bill.
It's a lot of work that has gone into it. So,
well, I'm encouraged to see some of the things in there about like allowing sub-metering of multifamily housing. That's an issue that we've come across as we've tried to promote different energy saving and clean energy solutions in Chinatown, which is like mostly large multifamily housing projects. And also, I think that kind of regulation of the competitive market, like, people are not totally against competition, but we are against scamming and people being preyed upon. I think those things are really important. And then also simplifying or, figuring out a better way to organize the programs. We've just seen a lot of delays, both because of like, the different silos of programs, like under Mass Save, but also a lot of delays because of like waiting for the utilities. If you're going to do something like, electric service upgrade, we may have that organized and have our contractors in there like very quickly, but could wait like months and months and months, for the utilities to do their part, even when it's just a small part of the work. So just glad to see some of these things in there.
Yeah. No, and I think the sub-metering piece too, I'll just one more note on that is the language is largely borrowed from existing rules that govern water submetering. So we didn't try to reinvent the wheel with this. There's existing rules in place that allow for submetering of water in multifamily residential buildings. So we tried to kind of model it off of that. And we're definitely working through, I think people understand the problem we're trying to solve, but are definitely raising some questions and making sure that consumers are not going to be harmed through this process. And so we're very open to negotiating and are talking through some of those issues with people to make sure that we get it right.
Thank you. I see Peter, and I think I had seen Melissa, but your hand might have gone down. I'll go to Peter and then come to Melissa if you still have a question. Oh, you're muted, Peter.
That usually helps. Thank you very much. Secretary Judge, I appreciate the presentation. The question I had was related to how would you reconcile the two components associated with one, allowing the relaxation of rules to allow gas companies to build the grid, which makes a lot of sense, right? They understand the infrastructure and can build that infrastructure, but reconcile that against the competitive supply component that you also spoke to. Because with the gas companies creating that grid, it has this impact of a reduction in the gas, but also getting more customers on the heat pumps. But then we also talk about the competitive supply component. So I'm sure there's some nuance there that I need to understand, if you don't mind clarifying.
Yeah, so, well, I would, there's, a couple things. So I don't know that those are entirely totally related, but I'll explain kind of both there. So the, you're absolutely right. Gas companies, they have a lot of experience putting pipes in the ground. So I think there's sort of a logical nexus here to allow them to play more in the space of developing geothermal. But we are also cognizant of the fact that there's other actors that do that work too. There's other private geothermal installation companies. We're not saying they can't do that. They can still go and work with customers. And there's actually a discussion about making sure that customers below a certain size threshold, maybe you don't have the utilities playing in that space. But as it relates to competitive electric supply, that's sort of a different issue, right? Because you're talking about customers choosing their electricity supplier. And in the case of these large customers that might be converting to geothermal, most of them have experts and lawyers and other people on staff to negotiate with competitive electric suppliers and enter into long-term contracts. The restructuring of the electricity markets and allowing consumer choice for competitive supply for large customers has been, I think, an unqualified success. It's been very good for those customers in stabilizing their rates. Where it's been a problem is in the residential space, because residential customers do not have that bargaining power. They don't have the expertise. They don't have attorneys and energy experts to negotiate with these companies on their behalf. And they're very susceptible to marketing scams and other things like along those lines. And they're just maybe not paying as much attention sometimes because they're busy and they have other things going on in their lives, but they can really get taken advantage of. So what we're trying to do with the competitive supply reforms is just make sure that those customers are protected from bad actors in that space and that they're not being taken advantage of. So I do think those things are separate, but yeah.
I appreciate the clarification there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Melissa, I don't know if you still had a question or if it was.
I was just going to make a comment and thank and Secretary Judge. I think the presentation was great. I mean, it is a lot of information in these bills this season, and there's so many bills even outside of your work. So thank you. I learned a lot just from listening to your presentation. So I just wanted to thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, I think, as I said at the outset, there's no one solution to this problem. And I think when we really looked at what is driving these costs, it's a lot of different things. And so, as I think I said at the beginning, this allows us to sort of chip away at it and really bend that curve so that cost increases slow down and customers are not experiencing increased costs at the rates they have been over the last 10, 15 years. Because it is sort of unbearable for customers, and we all heard it last winter, for sure.
I can still get a heat pump, right? And get the heat pump rate?
Yes. Oh yeah, no. Anyone who gets a heat pump and does it through Mass Save will be automatically enrolled. If you don't do it through Mass Save, you just need to contact your utility. And at least for me, I'll say Eversource did a great job. It took 2 minutes. You go, there's a website and you just plug in your basic information and take a picture of your heat pump, and then you're enrolled. And it was like in a matter of a couple of days. It was great. And I think the other utilities did just as good a job based on what I've heard. So it was a very successful rollout, an easy enrollment process.
Great. If there are no other questions, I'll just thank you again, Undersecretary Judge, for joining us and spending your evening with us. Now, Castle will open it up for comments or questions from the public, and we can take the questions and comments, and I don't think we'll have a whole lot of time to answer, but we'll take the questions and comments and if possible, answer.
So I don't see any hands right now, so I'm going to go and read some of the questions. Oh, a hand just popped up. Let's see. Mary Ann Babinski, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I probably said this already, or maybe I might have missed it. But would I be incorrect in saying that none of what you just said, or what parts of what you just talked about, relates to municipal light plant communities?
Not very much.
I know.
I will say, just to be honest, because they're regulated very differently than the other companies, and so the state doesn't have as much oversight over their rates or the programs that they offer. If you're a municipal light plant, I mean, you said you were from Westfield, I believe, right? So Westfield actually has its own gas company too. So there are many municipal light plants that have an investor-owned gas company, and so some of the things would relate to them. And if you're a municipal light plant with Eversource or National Grid or Unitil, Berkshire Gas, Liberty Gas as your provider, then there's some stuff in there. There's one provision I didn't mention that would modify the municipal light plant greenhouse gas emission standard by removing biomass from it, but that's about it. That's pretty much the only thing that touches municipal light plants directly that I can think of off the top of my head.
All right. And so in the drive to switch the state to more renewable energy, like solar and wind, et cetera, municipal light plants have their own portfolios, which they put together. Yeah. And so they try to get contracts with, and I know in our case, I think the last time I checked, they had, contracts with nuclear energy. And some of those go for 30 years.
Yes.
So the drive was a few years ago, I know MCAN was working on this too, is trying to work with the 40-something municipal light plants in the state of Massachusetts to turn them encourage them to go more towards renewable energy as parts of their portfolio. The problem was always some of their contracts they already had were for extended periods of time. So the state can't, as you already stated, I guess, they can encourage them, but probably not require them to move more in that direction.
We could. I mean, we didn't propose a program. I mean, they're not subject to the state renewable portfolio standard. They do have their own greenhouse gas emission standard. They only have to comply in 2030, 2040, and 2050, though. So any other year, there's no compliance requirement. So there are some things that and actually I'm wrong. There are two things that would impact municipal light plants, other than just the ones that have an investor-owned gas company. One is the procurement, the clean energy procurement language. It allows DOER, so the Department of Energy Resources, to partner with other parties, including municipal light plants, to provide to enter into long-term contracts. So if a municipal light plant wanted to partner with the state on an offshore wind procurement or a nuclear procurement or solar procurement or whatever it may be, they would be allowed to participate in that procurement, so they could coordinate with the state and leverage that buying power to go, the larger buying power of the state as a whole, to enter into some of those contracts. So that is one area where there would be some overlap with municipal light plants.
Oh, thank you very much.
Great. Kessel, I think you were going to read a couple comments in the chat.
Yes. So there are a couple comments that relate directly to this presentation. So I might start with those just while we have Undersecretary Judge on the line. How will the utility reform impact delivery fees?
Yeah. There's a lot of those things would impact delivery fees. I think the biggest ones would be the comprehensive utility planning and trying to reduce distribution and infrastructure costs, load management programs to optimize the use of the grid, so you avoid, again, infrastructure, building more infrastructure. So pretty much anything that can reduce demand and avoid infrastructure will put downward pressure on delivery costs. Additionally, the reforms to the net metering program will help reduce the cost of that program going forward. And the costs of the energy efficiency programs are recovered through delivery rates as well. So any reforms or administrative efficiencies you can get there would also reduce delivery costs. So there's a number of things that would put downward pressure on those delivery costs expenses.
Thank you. And then I think I saw something in the chat. Oh, it looks like it was the same question. Gotcha. Will the supply reforms be retroactive for people who have been harmed?
So the competitive supply, we can't change contracts that have been entered into. So the competitive supply reforms would be prospective in nature, but any future contracts that someone enters into would be protected by those new changes and the new consumer oversight provisions that we put in place.
Thank you. All right, I'm now going to go back and read comments that were submitted earlier in the meeting. All right. David Dow asked, how does the Massachusetts DEP, or Department of Environmental Protection, I believe, plan to incorporate renewable electric energy from wind farms and onshore solar panels / wind turbines into the regional grid? David Dow, he followed up with, does the Massachusetts Department of Energy consider Hydro-Quebec dam renewable energy generation effects on the life of rivers and consequences on Indigenous tribes in Eastern Canada for hunting and fishing? And then he recommended Robert McFarland's book, Is a River Alive?
I can.
And
do you want me to say anything? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to go back and get information and come back to him.
I can just say at a high level, I mean, I think our clean energy and climate plan establishes targets for reducing emissions and, has a number of clean energy deployment targets in there. And we have the state renewable portfolio standard program and clean energy standard program. So the renewable portfolio standard incentivizes new renewable resources. The clean energy standard, it is slightly broader and allows for large hydro, such as the dams up in Canada, and new nuclear to qualify. There's no new nuclear on the horizon at the moment, but large new hydro resources would be eligible under the state's clean energy standard. And then the renewable portfolio standard is a sort of a subset of that that's run by DOER. And that's where we're trying to, that's where solar and wind gets counted for the purposes of meeting our clean energy and greenhouse gas reduction targets.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then I believe this last question is for the council. It says, how is the council prioritizing EJ neighborhoods in resilience planning, such as cooling centers, backup power, microgrids, or flood prepared infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great topic, and it would be one that perhaps my colleague Undersecretary Antos could come and talk about resilience in communities, you know, extreme weather, summer months, or extreme cold. So it's definitely a good topic for us to think about if we want to ask Catherine Antos, Undersecretary of Decarbonization and Resilience. I know her team is working on this, so. Okay. I think, Kessel, that's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the December meeting was supposed to be either in Roxbury or Orange. We ended up doing remote, so our next meeting will be in Roxbury, and that is February 12th. So we meet every 2 months, and seems to me that one of the topics could be the petition process of how the community petitions to be designated as environmental justice population that Marianne Babinski has raised a few times. And then this resilience planning for environmental justice communities also seems a good topic. If council members, I guess, want to weigh in right now, how do you all feel about those two agenda items, and or if there's something else that you think we should cover in February?
Peter Mate here. I think that those are two good topics to at least cover.
Great, thank you, Peter. Caroline, I think you saw your hand.
Yes, I agree with Peter. I think those are both really good topics to cover.
Great.
I agree. This is Lydia.
Great.
Ari Zorn, I agree as well.
All right. Thanks, everyone. So please complete the evaluation question at the end of the Zoom webinar, and I think we're ready to adjourn. If I can get a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thanks,
Second.
Melissa. There's a second. Was that a second, Lydia?
Yes.
Any discussion? I'll ask Kessel to do a roll call for the members to vote in favor, opposed, or abstain.
All right. Kalila Barnett.
We're messing around in this place, so. You said not to use
You're
the
mute. Oh, Cheryl, I think
What?
yeah, thank you.
All right. Kalila Barnett. Madeline Fraser Cook. Melissa Harding Ferretti.
Yes.
Cheryl Holly.
Agree.
Caroline Hahn.
Yes.
Lydia Lowe.
Yes.
Marcos Luna. Peter Mothy.
Yes.
Sophia Owen. Jen Salinetti. Patricia Spence.
Yes.
Ari Zorn.
Yes.
Miles Gresham. And Maria Belen Power.
Yes. Thank you, Kessel. The time is 8:01 p.m. and we are officially adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.